Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Decode Strategy Labs live stream. And we have Prem Narayan, who's the Chief Strategy Officer of Ogilvy India, joining us for this live stream today. And the topic for today is going to be about getting brand strategy right and some of the timeless principles, some of the timeless methods around brand strategy. So, so a couple of things about the live stream first. This live stream is turning into Asia's hottest live stream. So it's like a classroom for marketeers from marketeers, and it is something where we try and get really senior people, experts, and they talk about their own personal learnings, their own experiences over the years, and they share the things, the best practices, and the mistakes also, sometimes the kind of mistakes that they've made. And there is a lot of rich learning that happens through the process. So the way this session is designed is like a online classroom kind of a session. So it's going to be a slow paced session. It's going to be jargon free. It's going to be very actionable. It's going to be packed with examples. And then we have Prem, so obviously it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm personally looking forward to this myself. So before we start, just a couple of quick things about my company. Decode Strategy Labs is something which I started last year in the smack in the middle of the pandemic, and I provide consulting work to marketing through marketeers as well as brands. And I also do consulting work for awards. And the last side of the business, which is the education and the training side of the business, that's the side which is probably really close to my heart. So as a result of that, I also provide a strategic marketing course on my website, which is available at any point in time. And in fact, I just offered a scholarship, and I'm about to announce the results of the successful students sometime soon. So this is a course which is, again, where I am sharing my own learnings. This is something which is a continuation of the work that I have been doing for a long time on my YouTube channel, where I've been making all these videos, and I've been putting together my thoughts and sharing it over there on YouTube. So finally, I am now sharing, I've managed to put all of that together into a tiny little course, and I'm offering that course on my website. Couple of heavyweight events coming up. So next weekend, we've got my three-party. She'll be talking about the art of observation, uncovering stories from hidden worlds. So she's like a extremely seasoned researcher who spent like a very long time in the industry, and there's some beautiful sharing, beautiful things that she has to share. After that, we have Ruby. She'll be talking about tracking and growing your brand asset. And then we have Dhiren. Dhiren is the CMO of Kraft Heinz Asia, and he'll be talking about how to stop thinking about that single, the proposition-led kind of marketing, and how to start thinking about the entire marketing mix as a marketeer. So how do you stay updated with all the things that I'm sharing? One of the things that you can do is you can share, you can follow the Decode Strategy Labs page on LinkedIn. And I keep on updating that page with all the future events or any announcements that I have. One of the things which you must do is subscribe to my YouTube channel if you've not already done that. So that's the first action point that I want to leave everyone with. And obviously, there's going to be a fascinating session, and it would be great if you can spread the word and let other people know. So, you can take the link from the YouTube video. It will be there forever, and share it on your profile or with people that you think who will find it relevant. So, apart from this, if you are someone who would like to be featured on the channel and you want to discuss some topics or some ideas with me, you can reach out to me on hello@decodestrategy.com. And or if you have someone else that you would want me to invite to this channel, you can also reach out to me. So on that note, let me add Prem to the conversation. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So it's super good to, finally get this session organized. I think it's been a long time in the making, and even better to have you. So, couple of things like, Prem, you've personally been like a mentor to me for a very long time, and I learned a lot from you while I was there at Ogilvy, and I always wished that I had more time to learn even more from you. So that didn't happen. So one of the things about Prem is that everyone loves Prem, and this is a common sentiment. Uh, uh, like it's usually very difficult for planners to get loved or liked by the creative teams, and I think planner is and I think Prem is a clear exception to that. So maybe Prem, before we move into the questions and today's topic, maybe if you can, there are a lot of people who probably don't know you. It would be good if you can give a quick introduction and maybe a little bit also talk about your deviation from planning and the adventure that you went into.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, all, for having me. An analog planner, perhaps, in the digital world, so to say. Yeah, meaning I've been in advertising now 24 years almost. And I kind of meandered into it. I was a servicing guy, and then I happened to do 3 years of consulting, and then I got bored of only doing PPTs.
Right.
So that is where I took the break, and then I was trying all kinds of crazy things. I wanted to join Dr. Kurian, become part of Operational Flood, and then he wanted to send me to Sri Lanka to start some milk factory in Jaffna. All of those things didn't happen finally. And then I ran out of money, and then somebody said Ogilvy is looking for a planner. So I went and knocked on their doors, and they were kind enough to give me a job.
Right.
And I just stuck around, man. That's it. When I joined, of course, Ogilvy India was a very small planning team. I would have been the third planner in all of Ogilvy at that time. That's how small we were. A very small outfit. And then in between, I got bored and I went farming and all of that, and I came back. So I guess all that I know. So yeah, 17, 18 years of this. That's what it is.
Okay. So normally, Prem, like I was telling you as well. So normally the speakers who join me on the live stream, we tend to do a presentation mode. But for this session, we will be using more of a question answer style. And I can already see a lot of comments from some of my ex-colleagues, like people from Ogilvy as well as others. So that's beautiful. So whoever is watching, hello everyone, I miss you all. And Prem says hello as well. So awesome. So the way I think we can structure this conversation, this might go beyond an hour if it goes on, and that's fine. But I think a good way in which we can probably structure this conversation is maybe we'll start with the marketing side of things. So as a planner, what is the view that you have gotten about the world of marketing? What is it that you think they do? And when they do it well, what does it look like? What really bothers them, and what really is that output in terms of a marketing brief, and that needs to come out from that whole process. So maybe you just share whatever thoughts in this whole yeah.
I mean, interesting question, Rahul, and I've whenever we agency folks write FE cases, I think about it because it seems like the whole client in the marketing department is doing nothing, and only we are doing everything, and that's why all the results happen.
Right.
So I think, which is obviously not correct. In the last 20 years, I've been lucky to work with some fantastic clients. And I think there are two words which are very loosely used, which is marketing strategy. And so let's just tackle them independently.
Right.
So the first, I think, is I think a lot of us, and I know some clients also do it. Like, I think advertising or promotion, as it used to be called in the old days, is only one P. And perhaps the P with the and I'm saying this being an advertising guy, perhaps the P with the least amount of impact if you
Correct.
got others right. Uh, so, and some of the finest clients that I have worked with have fundamentally got the other P's right,
Yeah.
which is they've got the product right, or the price right, or the distribution right. I mean, you look at simply how big e-commerce is in India. I mean,
Right.
we've contributed perhaps to creating awareness, but the fundamental shift is because somebody got pricing and distribution right. I mean, they just changed the game there.
Right.
And I think a lot of us and a lot of the good clients that I know, and let me talk about some clients, for example, people like Asian Paints.
Yeah.
What they do brilliantly is I think they understand the power of all elements of the mix.
Right.
So and they go beyond the lip service of being customer centric or whatever. So a
Right.
company like Asian Paints, when they spot, something like, most people are challenged when it comes to designing decor or deciding even what paints to choose.
Right.
They would make the effort to create, touch points in their dealerships through technology on their websites that really help consumers solve the problem.
Right.
And I think that's a great use of even planning kind of people, because fundamentally then you're not just meeting consumers to understand what's the communication solution. You're trying to understand what's the consumer problem, and the solution may not be communication.
Right.
Ideally, if it is not communication and you're creating something that's beyond that, then the burden of advertising or communication significantly reduces.
Yeah.
And I've seen fine marketeers, meaning like the fact that they started a painting service, they went into homes and figured out they're not able to fulfill it because there is a waterproofing or a leakage problem, and then they start a waterproofing product and service. So
Right.
the ability to solve consumer problems genuinely outside of advertising using product, price, service, distribution
Right.
is way more powerful, and also way more difficult.
Right.
It is easier said than done to toggle with price or to create new distribution channels or shift suddenly to e-commerce or any of those things, right?
Yeah.
So, like with most things, more pain, more gain. So the effort is more, and hence the impact is more. What it does, and I've seen some fine marketeers do that. The others, I've also seen some fantastic marketeers, and this maybe is linked to strategy when I use marketing and strategy. I'm saying strategy is fundamentally, and it's a word that's used so loosely that, anything. Strategy fundamentally is able to identify what's the key challenge or the factor that is going to make a shift, and the ability to focus all your attention to solve that problem, right? If action is not part of strategy, then there's no strategy. It's just some, and today we get a lot of woolly headedness around ambition being strategy, goal being strategy, vision statement is strategy. Meaning, I think they're all not strategy. If there is no action in the strategic document, then there is no strategy. And I have known clients, and I was fortunate to work with some of them, and large FMCG companies, who have a portfolio of brands. And I've seen clients who are able to, pull back and say which lever will have the most impact. So they will say, for example, there are 4 tea brands.
Right.
A marketeer is able to, a good marketeer, first of all, goes back and looks at data, not in the last 6 months, but usually in the last 3 months, 5 years. They're able to have a big picture. That's one great attribute of good marketeers, even in the FMCG space, where, the interventions may not be that easy, like I spoke about in paint, for example, or in service.
Yeah.
The other thing that they're able to do well is to decide within the portfolio, where salience and advertising can give you a huge lift, but somewhere else where, pricing can give them a huge leverage. And I've seen that happen with brands. Like I know great managers who've said, I'm rationalizing portfolio, I'm increasing advertising spend on So let's say there are 4 tea brands. I'm going to spend more on, say, X and Y brand and or I'm going to merge 2 brands or not spend on one brand, take the money that I'm saving there and going to correct the price index on the other.
Right.
And when they do that, they're able to disproportionately shift gains. And all of this is what I see good marketeers doing. Now, these are all outside of the communication piece.
Yeah.
And if there are any marketeers, I think as an advertising person, I would say, I think you should recognize and be humble enough to accept that advertising does have a role and
Yeah.
communication does have a role. But the other parts of the marketing mix, if they can be disrupted or changes made, can impact stuff far more significantly. So that's the
Right.
first piece that I want for everybody to think about. The other, I think, is good marketers usually have a very fair idea of what advertising can and cannot.
Yeah.
And often, I've gone into a client meeting and said, your sales won't go up because of this ad.
Yeah.
And they said, then why are you here? Meaning I was on the verge of getting sacked. I think most of us, advertising is a weak force in that sense. It not just brings salience to people, it endears people to the brand in subtle ways. It doesn't, meaning I like the way I think Binay said it, which is, communication is preparation for sales.
Right.
It is not sales. And there is a part of sales, at least brand building part of advertising is not that.
Right.
And there is a short term, click here, buy that mode, which is also important. But a
Right.
large part of the advertising and good marketeers I have seen either play along, they understand how advertising works, understand the impact of both short term and long term. More importantly, the importance of long term brand building.
Right.
And not just being focused on the short term effects of marketing, which I see becoming increasingly difficult today in the world of the ROI, where
Right.
everybody is worried about. See, ultimately, efficiency is effort to output. Effectiveness is the difference you make, right? And I would urge all marketers to chase effectiveness and not just ROI. Of course, we all have our compulsions. I'm not denying that. But then cost cutting and sharp targeting are good to its extent, not overall. That's broadly what I feel about most good marketers are able to do that. Then when they come to us, I think, Rahul, you were asking were you suggesting what's a good marketeer's role in a brief kind of stuff? Is that where you were?
So how does the handover happen? Because, there are people who are watching this stream who are probably not very used to a very structured way of, things happening in a traditional way. And a lot of them, the briefs are often sent over WhatsApp, or you just call the agency or your freelancer and you tell them that, okay, now I want something to be done for this. So that is the other extreme of the world. So maybe you share from a proper structured way that what's the handover process like, and where does the agency and the marketing team kind of intersect, and what is that whole process like?
Okay. So usually it's clients that you worked with. I've seen good client servicing, good planners being involved right through. Ideal. But certainly, and let me maybe illustrate this through a few examples of. So a good brief starts with a very sharp business objective, which is fundamentally the client's responsibility. Right. And the business objective usually is growth. Usually.
Yeah.
And then it boils down to a marketing objective, which then translates into some X, right?
Yeah.
So, let me give you an example of a very famous case that won at Cannes many years back, which was for Walker's chips. Okay. Mota moti mean big scene, all typical briefs are get new people to buy, or get people to buy more often,
Right.
or buy more. That's all. These are the
Yeah.
only three things, right? Meaning, now most briefs are the lazy marketing briefs have only this,
Right.
which is, grow by getting new people to buy me, grow by getting people to switch from A
Extra.
brand to B brand,
Yeah.
or grow by getting people to buy me more often.
Hmm.
It provides no clue whatsoever to
Hmm.
either the marketeer or the agency or the creative person on anything about the how.
Right.
A good marketing problem definition typically has the answer embedded in it.
Right.
Let me illustrate with Walkers.
Hmm.
Uh, and what I loved about the case, and most of you would remember the case, is, maybe just let me walk you through it and you'll appreciate why I say it. So,
Yeah.
their marketing problem definition, and this is where I think the best use of client data,
Hmm.
of share of business, growth, and all of that comes into play. Like a good planner and a client should look at, okay, where is my source of business? What will help me grow? And there may be many hypotheses on the table, right?
Hmm.
So if I have Walker's chips, I can say, hey, I can grow if uh, currently if somebody who buys me only during parties buys me every day, for example,
Hmm.
um, or whatever else it might be. Or it
Hmm.
might be, no, if somebody who buys Lays buys me, I can grow. It's okay, but not sharp enough. What I
Right.
really liked about this particular case was the fact that they defined the problem as
Hmm.
most Brits like to eat chips with sandwich.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a data point. So that's
Hmm.
data that says that most Brits like to eat chips with sandwich.
Right.
However, only 1 in 10 do so.
Hmm.
That's it. It's
Yeah.
nailed it. I don't need anything else. I don't need to go tell a creative guy anything more. So
Right.
then the task, the communication task from the, so they have made, okay, what have they done? They've done two things here.
Yeah.
He's identified a very sharp source of business, which is get sandwich eaters to buy chips when they buy sandwich. Very sharp marketing problem.
Right.
And I'm making an extreme point because this I thought was one of the sharpest definitions of it.
Yeah.
And then the communication problems become so much easier. Remind people of Walkers when they think of sandwich.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And most communication and advertising can be as simple as this
Right.
if you are very sharp about the problem. However, if we are fuzzy about the problem, then we get into this fancy word of, insight and proposition, which most people don't understand, and all kinds of hocus pocus business goes on there. Now,
Right.
what is an insight? I don't know, dude. I worked here for 20 years. And sometimes I think it's a new arrangement of old things. Sometimes I think it's all kinds of can I've been given. Whatever works to create a good piece of communication is an insight to me. That's it. But actually, a good insight should drive sales. Now, this definition to me, I thought was super sharp.
Yeah.
Now, the creative went out. Unfortunately, I can't share the video, but you can just go to Google and at some point look up Walker Chip's case and you will see it.
Yeah.
They went to a sleepy village called Sandwich in UK and then got Jensen Button and Pamela Anderson and Gary Lineker there in live. So one day when that sleepy village woke up, there was Lineker teaching people on the football field, Pamela Anderson as a barmaid, some boy band was singing, and Jensen Button was driving a cab. And they just took the content and put it up there and went viral. And it was one of the most effective jumps in sales for Walkers. And they
Right.
just ended with one line, which said, Walkers make sandwich interesting. And it was
Nice.
all sponsored by Walkers. So basically, Walkers got all these celebs into that village, right? Fantastic example of a very sharp marketing problem definition.
Right.
If you get that wrong, so great clients, good briefs, good planners, good account management people are able to work with clients to identify that sharp marketing problem. I'll give
Right.
you a couple of goof ups from my life to illustrate how wrong it can go, also,
Right.
so that you'll appreciate it. Um, So I used to work on Unilever teas on a brand called Red Label. I still do. Not calling it a goof up, but I'm just telling you how divergent your communication and your strategy can go if you don't get this right.
Yeah.
In this case, we didn't bother questioning the client, which I'll come to a little later on how to get good briefs from clients. We just took the client's marketing problem as a given. And their marketing problem definition was get local tea users to shift to Red Label.
Right.
Okay. Now, local tea brands are typically at 20-25% cheaper costs. And when we went and met them, they said, dude, I have drunk your tea before. I drink my sapat or whatever tea that I drink, and it's as good in taste.
Yeah.
I don't see any goddamn reason to pay a premium and buy your brand.
Yeah.
And then the usual marketing circus of concept writing started.
Right.
And without any jokes, I would have written about 100 concepts of all types.
Yeah.
Emotional, love blooms over a cup of tea, and then you will hug each other, and then it has strength, and from the functional to the emotional, the whole gamut of 100 odd concepts.
Right.
Nothing worked.
Yeah.
Nothing worked. Then in desperation, we made even stronger. So then the claims became harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking and laughing at it. And pardon what I'm saying, it wasn't a disastrous campaign, by the way. Apparently, it did okay for them.
Yeah.
So we went and said, actually, we went into health benefits of tea, and then tea has flavonoids, which improve blood circulation. And then it made tea into a bit of a medicine. So Red Label tea makes you tasty and healthy, and it gives you flavonoids and all of that jazz, right?
Right.
It created some salience. We had a celebrity. It may not have been wrong. And it's not about rights and wrongs as much as, but intuitively, when I met people, some of them used to snigger at me and say, oh, really, you drink tea because you want to improve your blood circulation? And then you look back and say, dude, yeah, I mean, somewhere you're also feeling, but okay, man, something's not sitting right. But yeah, but it's worked. It's tested green in concept test. It's selling okay.
Yeah.
And then there was a change in the marketing lead at some point who went and he also did data analysis and all. These are all proper clients, marketers, numbers, data. And they went back, and it wasn't any surprise that in the parameters that matter on tea, taste was far more ahead than health. Taste matters. You drink tea like a tasty cup of tea, man. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And then he went and looked back at data over the history of the brand, and he pulled out a very simple statistic which said, whenever the brand has had very salient advertising, my market share has gone. This was data number one.
Right.
And then he shifted to another source of business, very simply said that there are enough people who buy my brand only once or twice out of 12 times in a year. Even if these guys buy once or twice more, I'm done. Yeah. I've doubled my volume, hypothetically. Yeah. And when I do something like this, I also reach out. So he said, create really salient advertising on the generic benefit of taste. And he was sharp enough to almost, and he came and told, I'll give you a single line insight and a brief. And he said, taste matters. I've spoken to people. It matters when people get guests home, and hospitality and tea and taste, there seems to be a link. Let's try and create a story. Right. And then I went and met a consumer. I was talking to her about taste and tea and all that, which I'll come to a little later.
Yeah.
Then we created advertising, which was that, this Winston Red Label has won many awards later, can win and all. But basically, it came to an insight of, over a cup of tea, even two people who are absolutely different, Hindu Muslims bond and so on and so forth. We created that first piece, did very well, market share grew, beat Tata Tea over a period of time. But it shifted because of that one single problem definition. Is my source of business local brands, or am I getting guys who already like me to just buy me more often by being a little more salient and reminding them of how great Red Label's taste is finished? Fundamentally shifted it.
Right.
So, yeah. So I feel sometimes the onus is on people like us. So great clients are able to do that, to give you the sharpest problem definition one can have.
Right.
So if I were to break down in the brief, the way in which you articulate the marketing problem is often where I see huge gaps in briefs. which will then lead us into perhaps years of wrong communication, potentially. And great marketers sometimes get that right, sometimes they don't, like all of us.
Awesome. So let's move into the agency side of the the business. So maybe you, for the sake of some people who might not know exactly what the structure is like and what exactly do planners do, because it's always a difficult conversation to explain to what planners really do. So maybe oh, I think we've lost Prem briefly. We'll just wait for Prem to join the stream again. Yeah, we lost you briefly, Prem.
Yeah, I know that. So I don't know why it happened, but
Yeah.
it just threw me out, I guess. Talking to
Okay, so let's move into the agency side and talk a little more about what exactly do planners do, and this whole thing about writing that creative brief or doing that briefing. Like, what exactly is that whole, and how do you do it well?
Okay, so there are all kinds. There are schools that believe it is time planners, lean forward rather than lean back. There are some people who like to believe planners should. I have had a very different. Okay, two people who've kind of, and this is personal, right? This is just my view on what I feel, and then different people can have different schools of thought. When I joined Ogilvy, Madhukar, who's my boss, was my boss even then, gave me a very simple definition of our role, and we were a very, very creative, heavy agency which didn't have a planning culture. When I
Right.
joined, I was the third planner, and he told me a simple thing, and he said, it's a bit like a football field. And in our business, given that the output is a creative product, the creative is the forward. Uh, and he said planners are a bit like midfielders, and servicing guys are a bit like mid-back defense,
Right.
and sometimes they do midfield too. And he said your job is to give a great pass, not to score the goal, and both are important. uh, However, what we must not forget is in our business, even if I give a lousy pass, the creative guy still has to score a goal. Good, bad, or ugly, he still has to deliver a goddamn output, right? Because there is a deadline.
Correct.
So in simple terms, you try and give as good a pass as you can. And there are times where you give a pass that is so good, like Kevin De Bruyne, and all you need to do as Aguero is to tap your feet in and it's gone.
Yeah.
Sometimes your pass is quite lousy, and then you have to hope that fellow is a Ronaldo or a Messi and do all that he has to do to score the goal.
Right.
And hits and misses happen. But the best that you can do in that analogy is to try your damnest best to give as good a pass as you can. And the other definition that I've always liked, for those of you, again, go onto YouTube and check John Steele's video. John Steele used to be the planner at Goodby Silverstein. He did the famous Got Milk campaign. I've always believed what he said, which is planners need to be useful. To me, useful over clever any day.
Yeah.
There are lots of intelligent people in the world, especially in this part of the world for sure. But I think being useful is more important. So I've always thought of myself as part of the team. Sometimes I've helped the client distill down a marketing problem. Sometimes it is you have a thought or an insight which really helps a creative guy come up with something. Sometimes you have done none of these, but you've put together an argument to help sell that piece of work.
Right.
Perfectly okay. Sometimes you retrofit it, which is also perfectly okay.
or written the case study.
So between usefulness and being a midfielder, I've defined, this is the way I have looked at planning largely.
Right.
Having said that, there are some important tasks that I think planners can really add value to. And when I mean planners, I mean planning as a function. It could be anybody who is doing that. It could be a great
Right.
account management guy. It could be a great planner. It could be even a creative guy for all I care.
Right.
I'm talking of planning, not necessarily a planner.
Right.
I think some of the things that good planners must do. Let's take the case of Red Label. I'll talk of a couple more.
Yeah.
Having centered on taste and salience, I think a planner's job starts there, right?
Right.
In this case, the client actually triggered and told us about, hey, maybe hospitality and tea and taste have a connection. Now, that often is a planner's start point. In this case, the client himself was pretty evolved, so they were able to. So for you to think about when does taste matter and all that. And I went and met this consumer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the story of how this campaign came. And when I met this consumer, and I was talking to this woman in Lower Parel in Bombay, Maharashtrian lady, and we were just chatting, and I wasn't chatting with her about tea at all. I was generally chatting with her about life and home, and I was asking her, tell me about some of your most hospitable homes. And she spoke about her grandmother's house, and she told me a couple of beautiful stories. And I think the trick is to just talk to people like you would talk to people and not like consumer. You know, these words sometimes just mess us up. And we have huge agendas when you walk there. Just talk to them like people. And she told me some beautiful things. You know, she told me like, I went. ऐसा है sir कि कभी-कभी ना, at times there are people who come home. You know, there are some people when they come, you just give them water. Right. Because you wish they will go away quickly. Said there are some people to whom you give soft drink because they're not very close or anything, but there is still a certain amount of formality, so it won't look nice. Just give them a glass of water. So I serve them a soft drink. Then there are some people who come home with whom actually you want to spend a lot of time, but usually these are the people who are always in a hurry.
Right.
Actual Murphy's Law. Then she said, those moments I put the tea on the kettle or on the stove, because the time it takes to make it, the fact that it's a hot beverage, gives me time then with that person, because then tea just creates that moment. Usually they walk up to the kitchen, we have that conversation. Then I was talking to her about hospitable homes, and then she told me about, she coming from a Maharashtrian conservative, whatever, I think she was a Hindu family or something like that, and her best friend happened to be a Muslim girl. Right. And she said, I used to simply love the kheer or whatever they used to make for Eid. Right. And I used to, no matter what, without telling folks, I used to go and have that. And I heard this story and I came back and I was thinking, and I was thinking food has this amazing ability, just cuts across, borders, caste, creed, religion, everything else, right? And then amongst many things, I was telling this to the creative team and they came back with the script. And why am I telling you this is being sensitive and empathetic to just listening to stories and translating sometimes a marketing objective or communication objective, right? To say that, really give me beautiful stories on taste and tea that bring alive Indian hospitality. And then I was thinking about, in our mums, in the old days when we were kids, mums will serve, the mum and the maid will sit and bond like sisters over that cup of tea and share their woes. You and I would have seen it as children. Yeah. They're organic, right? They're cultural and we all recognize it. And these kind of things happen. Sometimes it also planners can start right. Planning can start right on top. They can go to clarifying the marketing problem. I don't think your source of business is correct. Can we look at the data again? Get to a point where your relationship is so good that you are able to question the marketing brief. Right. And I use these words carefully because if you don't have the relationship, you don't have the right to question it. And most often people think planning doesn't need relationship. I think you need relationship on the back of your credibility and your work. Right. For the client to come and bounce and say, hey, dude, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Yeah. So from there to a communication objective to some kind of stimulus and trigger for creative people to play with. There's one in-between box which also sometimes is very important, which is who is this consumer?
Right.
Often that also is not done well
Yeah.
enough. Like I remember Nirav, who is a planner with us, did this work for Tata Sky many years back. And it was for, I think, Active English as a product.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget that case, because I think the client and many of us, when we made the product, it was basically English teaching classes on a channel on Tata Sky, which most people thought would be adopted in mid-town, small-town India for people to teach their kids English. That was our hypothesis.
Right.
However, it could be availed only if you had Tata Sky connection. Now, what we realized when we went and met consumers was that most people who had a Tata Sky at home were of a certain kind of household. So the kids were anyway going to English medium schools, and they
Right.
had no problem with English. The people who had problem with English was actually the mothers,
Right.
who were saying, we didn't grow up in English medium school. Some of the parents speak English. I don't speak English well enough. There's a slight social awkwardness.
Right.
And then from there, the product actually got pitched as a means for mums to learn English and to avoid social embarrassment. Again, a very fine piece of communication. But it
Right.
came from there.
Nice.
So defining the who is another place. And then,
Right.
of course, there is down the pipe in the brief, which is the personality of the brand, which is the most difficult and ambiguous one, but very important in today's time and age, and distinctiveness. But yeah, you kind of be, if you can work long enough on a brand, be a guardian of it. So all of these perhaps is part of planning. And to be honest about the effectiveness of it and be humble about it is, I think, the role that planners play and can play well. Most creative people want you to be inspiration, to give them some stimulus to work with.
Right.
Most importantly, simplify things for them.
Right.
Surprisingly, even amongst marketeers, I think what they seek from a planner is simplicity and clarity, because the world's gotten so complex, Rahul, today, with so much getting thrown around, and this whole the diversity of media availability. Nobody seems to be really sure of what is long term, what is short term, the ROI business, what channels to deploy, what is the best way to do it. Should I do full funnel? Should I do only salience?
Yeah.
I think anybody who can simplify that will be useful, and the planner can perhaps do that. I always keep saying the planner perhaps has in a way, the easiest and the best job in the agency. I say easiest because you don't have you don't have as much deadline pressures as the creative guy has, or the scripting guy has.
Right.
So your job, is perhaps just a little bit pull back and kind of help them in whatever way you can. That's
awesome. So you've described beautifully the communication development process, the how the entire advertising is, campaigns are created. If I were to ask you to take a step back, and when a brand is being created, even before it moves into the communication process, what exactly is that process? And I remember you talking about Sholay and the personality being described by that example. But if you're trying to define a brand as a marketeer or as a person who is in an agency, whether you're a planner or creative or someone else, what is it that you need to think about, or what are the things that are important when it comes to the key ingredients in a brand? Obviously, a lot of brands have their own, keys and cores and love and triangles and a whole bunch of things. But what do you think are the essential ingredients?
Okay. And let's now. It's quite a textured question. Let me think about it. Okay, most often, Rahul, I have found, so there are three types of situations that you come across when you're trying to think of, again, the word brand strategy, as you call it. Again, when I say strategy, then be very clear on what challenge is this brand trying to address. That often dictates how you craft even the brand strategy. Meaning simply between brand strategy and marketing strategy, I like to think of brand strategy as the who and the marketing strategy as the how. So that precedes this normally.
Right.
And they are symbiotic in some way. Having said that, most often I find if you're working on a brand that's been around for a long time,
Right.
try not to dick around with it too much. Is the simplest advice I can give you. I have found, like when I walked into many corporates, great brands like companies like Unilever, Asian Paints, and many others, meaning banks. If you just walk around and see some of the old posters in their corridors, try doing that when you walk into a client's office. If you're working on an old brand, you will often find the core of the brand and what it stood for somewhere sitting there. And in the loops of the multiple not invented here syndrome between agency and clients, we have just buggered what was originally good, perhaps. So, like I have seen Lifebuoy and Germs poster in Unilever, and then I know they went through a circle and then came back to Germs. So I think the core of the brand always lies there.
Right.
I've seen it happen. So in crafting brand strategy, if it indeed is an old and trusted brand, think of two things. Go back to some of their best advertising and the best times they've had. Best advertising not measured as what agency people think is best advertising, but as best advertising, which typically tends to be the most famous, but also has delivered the best results, which clients will know. Right. And when you look at them, we will be able to identify certain things in those brands and just try and look deeper into what are those assets that make it work. It may be a property, a distinctive asset, a tune, a logo. It may be many things that contribute to it, including the emotional and the functional proposition of the brand.
Right.
Sometimes, in the pursuit of, and that I've learned in the lockdown, I've gotten laughed at a lot in the last 1 year because my family keeps listening to all the conversations and they just on earth can't understand how a soap can be redeeming somebody's life and how a shoe can be, maybe standing for some. They just aren't, because they're normal people unlike you and me, so they're not able to connect the Herculean leaps that we seem to be making in connecting to far-fetched purposes or emotional payoffs. And then you're wondering, meaning, really, this bar of soap, this detergent that cleans is going to make me whatever super successful or bring alive my identity, meaning give me a break, meaning somewhere you've gone too far away. So just to your point, on good old brands, go back to what works. Simply. Sometimes you find brands which are in deep shit. Where there is serious, perhaps, overhaul required. And in those cases, often there is one of two things would have fundamentally be shifting there. Either the functional core of the brand would have changed or needs to change, or a delivery mechanism may change, i.e., so let's say it's moving into e-commerce and convenience and delivery, and it's like, delivery at home is becoming the face of the brand and not the restaurant, for example. Then there is a strong pivot towards the functional benefit changing. If not, so either there's a new innovation or there's a functional benefit that's changing, or there is a shift in the target audience that you're going after. You've been, like, I once worked on VIP suitcases many years back, and the brand was steeped in hard luggage.
Right.
But the category from 80 hard, 20 soft became 80 soft, 20 hard. Right. VIP had no equity there.
Yeah.
So how do you then transform? What do you keep? You keep the name. You keep perhaps one part of the brand which is still about travel, perhaps, let's say hypothetically, that you still want to hold. But if, for example, this brand's core was about durability, then you may have to question whether that is relevant in this context and what shift do you make. So there are times when there are serious inflection points, pretty dangerous. Usually happens when the business is in bad shape. Usually, troubles up there. Those are the second kind of situations. So to me here, if you are just changing insight and changing proposition and changing purpose, it is a sign perhaps that it ain't good enough.
Right.
If there is a fundamental shift in target audience, proposition, reason to believe, the more tangible parts of the brand, which you have then moved up to an emotional differentiator for the brand when you craft it, makes sense. But nothing about all of this has changed, but you are suddenly only changing an emotional payoff. Chances of success are few and far between. That's my feeling. Then you get opportunities when you craft a brand from scratch. When you're doing that, I only have two words for you. Most people talk about ambition, vision, and all of that. I like to put two words: honesty and humility. And I'll tell you why. Because I think it's become quite fashionable today to see if you indeed have started this business or this brand, and no matter what sector you're in, with really making a difference. Say you are a Patagonia in your head when you're beginning, then by all means stay true to that and build your brand with that in mind. However, there are simpler noble intentions like helping people be happy eating a chocolate or an ice cream, or getting him from A to B, or being of use to some people and making some money out of it. And I think there is no need for anybody to feel apologetic about it. And I think if we can be honest about what difference do we really make to people's life in simple terms, and be honest enough to articulate that difference and craft the brand in that sense, I think you'll be better off. This is not to say that purpose is wrong or vision is wrong. I'm not saying that. It depends. The honesty point is only about where are you coming from. Did you start this business for that? If not, crafting the brand for that on day one may not be a good place to be. You may evolve to that as a human being, like a brand also could. That's okay. If not, then better off. See, let me articulate this difference. Purpose as a means to gain communication salience, and I'm not sitting on judgment, is one thing. Purpose at the core of the brand is another thing. At least be honest enough to recognize where you sit.
Very true. Awesome. So I think in the next set of questions, basically I just want you to maybe you've dropped a lot of pearls of wisdom. There's like ton of comments, everyone's enjoying it, but I think maybe it would be good if you can talk through some examples and just some illustrations, like maybe work that you are extremely proud of, close to, or like have enjoyed being a part of, or have seen, and you really respect that kind of work. So maybe talk through the whole process, the important aspects during the different stages, or the important steps or stages which led to the output finally becoming what it became.
Yeah, so like I spoke about, Raul, I think we covered some of it already, but things like again, see, most people have 4 or 5 great campaigns in their career, man. And we all tend to act like, for all 4 or 5 good ones, there are 50 average ones and perhaps 20, 30 bad ones. Okay, so let me just go about it.
So
in my 15, 20 years, Rahul, things that I was proud of and I have been proud of. So my very first campaign in Ogilvy, I was very proud of, because it was startup. I was very proud because of multiple reasons. It kind of perhaps also got Ogilvy at that point to recognize this creature called planning could add some value to people's lives. And believe me, at that point, Ogilvy didn't need any of us. They still do and had enough firepower to create magic on their own. So,
Right.
but I think it makes a difference because, again, I thought it was good planning.
Yeah.
Simply because the brief said a more powerful engine, and we had a campaign done on power. And it just out of inquisitiveness, I went and met people, and again, everything that we spoke of, right?
Yeah.
Client was clear. The guy, the politician, at that time there was only Scorpio and Safari, unlike today. The politician who's going to buy this Lal Batti big white car to mark his statement is anyway going to choose between us and Scorpio, so we don't need advertising to sell there.
Right.
So we made a choice on incremental revenue would come from corporate-ish or self-employed people choosing us over sedans.
Right.
And then to decode what the SUV meant for that person vis-a-vis a sedan, and then went into things like, and then I read up books, and there's a very famous book called Importance of Living by a guy called Lin Yu Tang. If you have the time, you should read it because it basically glorifies the vagabond. And one chapter in that book said, "Man, the only working animal." We all. We all think of ourselves as superior to every other creature, but then those led then to reclaim life, and this whole point about the corporate career being a bit of a rat race, and the SUV giving you a sense of freedom, basically an emotional trigger. So I really loved that campaign. Again, a lot of the process we spoke about, a little more inquisitiveness, being clear about the TG, having an emotional meaning, all of that I think helped.
Right.
I also had a very small contribution, but I kind of enjoyed it later in what happened with Pulsar. We had this iconic line called "Definitely Male."
Right.
But actually, when I met consumer and we were trying to evolve it, and it was going in one direction of being this chick magnet and all of that with a line like that. And when I actually went and met a few guys, the real hardcore Pulsar guy said, the guy who will stop at the signal next to a 350cc guy and said, "Will you agla signal tak race lagayega?" Which is, "Will you race to me with the next signal?" That's the guy. That's the Pulsar guy, right? And said, when I see all this stupid advertising and all this, it's all kiddie stuff. This, being one chick magnet and all is not my trip, dude. What I really, and they recalled one commercial where, Pulsar, when they launched the Pulsar 180, which said only a Pulsar can beat a Pulsar. And for the first time, we showed a wheelie and an endo and a stunt and all that.
Right.
And I think I made a small contribution there when I went and told, I think the definition of male in the case of Pulsar is in the world of stunting.
Right.
It was not as if it was not there. There was already a script that existed. Actually, we resurrected it back. And that's how Bike Ballet, that famous Pulsar film, happened. And I think that shifted the brand in one direction. I've thoroughly enjoyed working on Asian Paints, more from learning what great marketing can do.
Right.
One company that I've really respected for its ability to genuinely do marketing and not just communication.
Right.
Everything they've done with Handover, with Decode, all of that. I have also really enjoyed Red Label, the journey that we did on tea. Right. We did something for Hammam, which I'm really proud of. Then, of course, some other stuff here and there. But largely, all of those follow some of these principles. But what I really enjoyed doing once had nothing to do with advertising, but which I think is the power of all of people like us in this business, and which is perhaps where the future of planning lies.
Yeah.
And is the ability to have empathy to solve consumer problems beyond comms, right? Could be, I'll give you an example. I went and met an entrepreneur with a friend of mine in Bhopal.
Right.
And he was a 25 crore furniture company who was planning to expand into something bigger.
Right.
And he said, I'm planning to get a license from an Italian brand. They're charging me 1 crore and it'll give me some design creds. And then I'll be able to compete with the Godrej Interiors of the world with that, some whatever Italian label. Right. It'll give me the brand credibility. And then I'll be able to compete with them. And it was just one conversation like this. And I was asking him, so what do you supply furniture for? And he said, I supply furniture to offices, hospitals, and schools.
Hmm.
And the first thing that struck me is, you supply furniture to some of the most uncomfortable places on earth. Why would you chase design? Why wouldn't you chase comfort?
Right. Right.
Now, this to me is,
Yeah.
and I said, look, and then I was just looking back, like we were all kids in the same class, and there were
Yeah.
classmates of mine who were 6 feet when I was 5 or 4.5.
Right.
And why were all tables and chairs of the same height in school?
Hmm.
Why can't office chairs beep every 1 hour and tell me to wake up and take a walk?
Right. Right.
Uh, and when I see what IDEO does and design thinking and all of that, I sometimes wonder, perhaps that's the real power of this, to go up to marketeers, clients,
Yeah.
society, people, and just look at it as, and Tioji and Dilip and all of them do that.
Yeah.
This whole, just a little bit of empathy and human centeredness around understanding real people problems and solving them is perhaps where the focus is. It doesn't matter what. Yeah. What else?
Awesome. Okay, so just a couple of more questions before we wrap up. One of the really big and probably extremely irritating shift which is happening in the industry as a whole is because of digital marketing. There seems to be the whole approach tends to be shifting. Now digital is excellent. The power that it can unlock and the things that you can do with it is excellent, but there is a lot of myopia as to how digital should be used, and I'm sure you have a lot of opinion about that. So maybe talk about, like, how what's a good way of using digital and to really unlock its power, and and even maybe what planners can do in the process.
Okay, so these are some views from what I have read. I'm not,
Yeah.
surely don't claim to be an expert on that, but here's my feeling on it. And
Right.
feeling basis, something that I've heard from Binay and Field and people like that. So fundamentally, I think there are two buckets to think about. I think one, and this is proven now across, this is not me talking, this is data. There is
Yeah.
data that says that you need to split 60-40 between brand building and activation or short-term tactics.
Yeah.
A lot of marketing money today, unfortunately, is focused on the short-term tactics. And digital is a fantastic medium to achieve short-term growth and efficiency in a very positive way. I don't mean it in a negative way at all. You are
Yeah.
able to sharp target, to get people to act immediately. All of that, I think, the digital
Yeah.
medium does well.
Yeah.
However, we mustn't forget that, like I said before, any advertising or communication is a preparation to a sale.
Right.
This whole theory that 50% of my advertising is waste and all of that is actually misled us in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. If you guys want, you should read any of Binay and Field on effectiveness marketing or Byron Sharp. We all now know that we grow most by penetration, i.e. getting new users.
Yeah.
To do that, you have, meaning you start selling a car 15 years before it's bought, perhaps. And in many cases, in many categories, even if it's a simple chocolate,
Yeah.
the brand is built much before you actually buy. And I feel we collectively, between marketeers and agencies, haven't really leveraged the power of these mediums to build brand.
Right.
I'm not saying these mediums aren't good to build brands. I am saying we haven't figured out the right way to build brands on these mediums. And hence we spend a lot of money on targeting and retargeting and all of that stuff,
Right.
which is not useless. It is important. 40% of the money, short-term growth is critical for business. By all means, do it.
Yeah.
However, there is something called a selection bias that happens, which we must not forget.
Yeah.
See, in digital, there's a famous story. A guy went and gave coupons to 3 kids to and figured out who got most people to redeem the coupons for pizza.
Yeah.
And one guy beat the other two guys hollow. And then when they went and figured out why he beat them hollow, it so happened that this guy was anyway standing in front of the pizza store.
Right.
That's the selection bias.
Right.
A lot of the short-term things, a good part of it, suffers from it. We are talking to people who anyway would have bought you.
Right.
Meaning, if you're going by digital behavior, is somebody checked, then you're retargeting him and so on and so forth. The propensity of him to the category is already high, right? So, so you're not going to get terribly a lot of new people interested in your brand or your category through this kind of work. For that, you still need the brand building kind of work, which is not waste. It is just thawing the guy, right? Or the person over through emotions, through whatever. And a lot of us do that. A lot of good advertising and communication does predispose people to the sale.
Right.
We don't do enough of that. And video fundamentally is the most powerful tool to do it because it leverages emotion the best.
Correct.
Now, on digital, can we build video? Of course. There is data from the US that says the most effective YouTube campaigns are 1 minute and 40 seconds long.
Right.
This is YouTube. Facebook runs long campaigns for themselves. And they're not saying you should run short campaigns.
Yeah.
What they're saying is that it's a bit like Vinay said it in an interview where he said it's like if you've told the story of Red Riding Hood once fully and then you show just the hood or the witch or the godmother, then everybody gets reminded of the full story.
Right.
So there is a role for long format, powerful video content, certainly for brand building on digital platforms.
Right.
And if we do that well enough, of course, you can do the 3 seconds and the 6 seconds and all of that to get people to be reminded of the brand. The onus is how many people have the patience, which is where I think the role of culture and creativity and all of that come in. It is far more difficult in a lean-in medium where somebody's actually come. See, most people, see, we are in a business where people want to avoid your product, right? Advertising is something that people want to avoid. So we better be our creative best to get somebody to watch it. And by the way, people also say the only purpose of branding is to make things easy. Like nobody wants to have a relationship with brands and all, dude. I'd rather have a relationship with people. And think of it, if people thought so hard about brands, I mean, you'll be standing in your department store aisle every month for 4 hours thinking of which salt and soap to buy. What branding does is to help you buy blind. Sabun, chalo, Lux, le liya, Colgate. That's what branding does.
Correct.
So I think we shouldn't carry us, but my broad take, Rahul, on the digital front is this, which is somewhere the 60-40 is important. The power of brand building on digital is important. We must not forget it is a fantastic reach medium today.
Right.
There's enough data now that says that only TV or TV plus digital is 2.5 times or something like that more effective than only digital or only TV.
Correct.
From data in the UK, I don't know how it pans out across other countries. So there certainly is merit, especially when we are going to younger audiences for whom this is a reach medium. They may not be watching as much television as I do or my parents did, but they may be watching YouTube, and it's up to us to make it interesting for them to watch it longer.
Correct.
So that's my feel. The second bit that I feel on this front on digital is there's enough great quality data that is sitting there, which we are not tapping into insightfully. Like, let me give you an example of what we did for that acid attack case, just as an illustration. And then if you're interested, some of you should read Everybody Lies. It's a great book. So, just being insightful about, I think it's good to talk to people offline on their behavior online. Like we were doing this pro bono work, which one at Cannes and one effectiveness, creative, everything for acid attack victims about 4 years back. An NGO came to us. They had no budgets. And they came and said, we want to help, create awareness for this, sign a petition to get this acid sale banned. By whatever serendipity, we hit upon. it came from very simple thinking. Women are likely to sign the petition, or no woman searches for acid attack.
Yeah.
But lots of women, beauty tips was one of the highest search terms on YouTube.
Right.
Within which how to apply lipstick ABC were among the highest search terms here. Now, can I use that to create a video? Beauty, one thing that acid mars. Now, if this went as a brief to create digital content, then I think we're talking more insightful stuff.
Correct.
However, today we have an Uber brief, and then we say, "Arey, do some 360. Let's find out something viral we can do on."
Yeah.
Meaning, how is a creative guy supposed to fathom that? Meaning, I don't know. So I think we are a bit short in our own understanding of collective, of how we've kind of understood how to find propositions and insights on the non-digital side. On the digital side, I'm sure some of the good ones really do it well. Right. I think if you use data and insight and even talk to people about their behavior online, you may be able to get far richer and better output than we currently seem to get. But by saying it, meaning as is true with television advertising or any other form of advertising, we have a lot of landfill on this side of the story too. So, which nobody cares about.
Yeah.
The only exception, Rahul, to this whole 60-40 rule perhaps is the startups.
Yeah.
Where, you may not have the luxury to invest in this long term and all. That's easy for brands who are established to do so.
Right.
Here's what I've heard and I feel. It's not original what I'm saying, but I feel if you're at some of the rules don't hold good, you have to survive. So, targeting that gets you to a certain level of scale where you have enough money to invest behind brand building. I think you can play around with the rules till you get to that point. But at a point at which you feel as a startup, there are 5 other people like you, or there isn't enough in your product or your service that's new enough, or there are enough copiers, people who are perhaps throwing more money, then it's perhaps time for you to start building the brand. And even if you're a startup, I would always encourage you to craft the brand as you start. And at least think about, like I said, honestly, what do you do? What's your core proposition? What are the 1 or 2 strategies in marketing that will help you leverage the most and give you the most traction? Building some level of distinctiveness and identity for the brand may be useful, even at the beginning, so that you can just keep building on it. But how far you should grow on brand building will depend on how quickly you get to a point at which you're not going to get incremental returns by just just doing sharp targeting and talking to the same people about the same product. The moment your brand needs the intangible, it's time to start doing brand building, and that you will know the moment you are the 10th education app in the country. Do brand building on day 1. If you're the first brand building app, first app on in the education platform, then maybe you have a luxury of 1 year. But then if you have the luxury, start building the brand early and create enough of an entry barrier for others to go. The only catch is the resources. Startups are starved of resources. You need to get to a critical point till you have that. Till you get there, bend the rules, play with it, do the sharp targeting. But never forget that it ain't going to last beyond a point.
Right. Awesome. So I'll ask my last question, and then maybe after that, if there are any questions from the audience, we'll take a quick look at that as well. So, there are a lot of people from advertising and a lot of planners. So I would get kicked if I didn't ask you this question. So that what are some of the tips that you would give to planners today, or maybe someone who works on a strategy for a brand? What are some of the key tips that you would want to leave them and ask them to do?
Okay. The first thing, I know there may be planners who are very junior, mid, senior. I don't know. So I like to go with what John Shaw used to be the planning head of Ogilvy at one point in time. John Used to be Wyden before, and then he was an APAC head, and then he moved to London. And he wrote the most beautiful and the simplest KRAs for planners. And it had only 3 things. And he said, if you're a junior planner, the client and the creative partners and the servicing people should rather have you in the room than not.
Okay.
There are some people who you say, "Arey, aa gaya, this fellow is going to come and give me some long-winded gyan," and they just want to run away from you. Don't be that guy.
Right.
Girl. Be the person. And the only thing he said is always nobody's expecting you to crack the solution if you're a junior planner. If you do, great. But certainly they expect you to be 2 things. One is to be super enthusiastic.
Right.
The enthusiasm wins like 90% of the battle.
Right.
And the second is bring something interesting to the room of it. Whether it's a consumer story, some ad, something that competition has done, some new piece of information, or even a espionage. And you know what? I know this client, this is the kind of stuff he seems to be buying. Anything.
Right.
But something interesting into the room if you're a junior planner.
Right.
If you're a mid-level planner, your client should call you before he wets his brief with his boss. Then you're successful. And everything we spoke about, crafting the marketing objective, all of those stuff. Right. If the client calls you saying, boss, we're going to start the campaign, here's what I'm thinking. Then you've started planners can influence, right? They can't we're not the heroes of the show, most often. So if the client calls you to craft the brief,
right,
to use you as a bouncing board, then you're getting somewhere. So be that person. Similarly, when your creative guy calls you to share an idea before he shares it with his boss or her boss, know you're a successful planner. Because everybody wants some level of bouncing board and feedback. You know what it happens? When a creative guy shares, he's doing 2 things fundamentally.
Right.
He is basically checking, is this meeting brief, will it work? They're also checking the level of energy in the idea. 2, they also want some positive validation or inputting that can perhaps lift the idea into something else.
Right.
3, I have found this useful in my journey. If you're in a room and a junior, you're a mid-level planner, please back your mid-level or junior creative guy's idea with his or her boss. Right. Because remember, that junior or mid-level creative guy will one day become the national creative director or something. And he'll thank you for being the voice in the room that supported
it. Amazing.
So those I think are on that. Those were simple things that I think, but just to put it in action, I think we touched upon this.
Yeah.
Clever gets you only X far. Useful gets you far further. I have always looked at planners who come to me with, hey, I worked and these are 4 pieces of work that I did. Not 4 PPTs I wrote or case studies I wrote.
Right.
And it doesn't matter as long as I know that the person played an important role and was useful in the process. And sometimes, we overestimate. It's not like you're only useful if you gave that one pearl of wisdom from which the creative guy got a springboard. Yeah, of course, you feel great when you do that. But sometimes the 3 proposition which you gave that he ditched to get to the 4th, he or she ditched to get to the 4th also contributed as much to that. Or you defining the problem did it. So super critical if to be useful, I think, that's what I've felt. The most important thing that I feel today is also to be able to simplify such a complex world with all kinds of things thrown in and performance matrices and, all these jargons of personalization on scale and, niche target marketing. The more personalized and niche you are, I can tell you are going to the lowest common denominator of creativity.
Right.
The moment it say, hey, Rahul, and then it says, hey, Prem, then the rest of it is already templatized shit. So useful and simple. And and as much human and empathy that you can have. And if you're an interesting guy, have enough stories to tell people.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. So there's been a flood of comments, while you were talking, and I think there's one. It's lovely to see Heval, Priyanka, Jay Mawani, and so many ex-colleagues, Rohit Sharma, and a lot of people. Wow, lovely. So there's one question from Jay. I'll just pop it on your screen. Um, do you see rigid brand guidelines stifling disruptive thinking or say come in the way of becoming today's brand, especially on digital, that is moment marketing, real-time marketing, etc.?
Tough one. I don't know, Jay. I mean, let me try and answer this. Rigid brand guidelines can be stifling at times, to be honest. Uh, However, somehow the big brands always manage to do it. I mean, even you look at, I mean, everybody will talk about the Nikes of the world able to do it. But even like brands that we do, right? Even you take a Cadbury Dairy Milk, it is able to do interesting digital work without being bogged down, yet being true to its core of being, glass and a half full, generosity. It will never do a slapstick ad, but it stays true to its character, and yet it is able to manage work across multiple platforms. Uh, Perhaps some of it could also evolve, but it depends on uh, who has written those guidelines. Some of there are people who just load that thing with so many words and so many rules that you just can't. Meaning, if somebody wants to really box you, you really can box it in, but I don't. So you have to be careful with that. So if it's at any point as a creative guy
Right.
really stifling you, it's worth having a chat with people saying it is stifling you. Having said that, I think a simple test for any creative person, and this is my way of evaluating it, does it feel like the brand? However
Right.
interesting it is an idea, if it
Yeah.
doesn't for you feel like it's your brand and you work on that brand, then don't do
Yeah.
that idea. Don't do it. It may be interesting, but not your brand. It
Yeah.
may be a really disruptive idea, but it may not be your brand.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I mean, then it's up to us.
Okay.
But all of
Okay.
us get tempted. To be honest, to Jay's question, you all tend. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, at which point did Nike stop being performance, and when did it become activist? God
Right.
knows.
Yeah.
Meaning, Kaepernick is not performance.
Correct.
Kaepernick is a point of view.
Correct.
Somebody took a stance that
Yeah.
it was okay. But if you are doing that, my only submission is do it for something really big and worthwhile.
Yeah.
And then shift to the course of the brand totally. There's no point doing it for, I've got this really interesting post or a video that will last for 3 days, but for that, I want to break the rules of the brand. I'm not a great fan.
Awesome. Maybe we'll take one more question after this. So, what do you think about all the new startups using celebrities in communication as soon as they receive funding? Is this a healthy pattern? Maybe a quick opinion on what is your perspective?
I hate Ranveer Singh now. That much I can tell you. Thanks to IPL. See, okay, I think it's purely driven by the need to ramp up numbers quickly, nothing else.
Yeah.
And most of that work sits in that 40% of short-term activation, not of brand building. Majority of that work, meaning including work like Cred, which everybody tom-tommed about. I really love that piece of work.
Yeah.
It is not brand building. Like at the end of it, what residual memory? It could over a period of time perhaps build it, but a lot of the celeb heavy work that we've seen in the recent past that startups have a lot of money, so they throw at it, is to just break clutter in a super cluttered world. And like I said, in cases where the other piece in the marketing mix are fairly undifferentiated and banal. So then the whole bloody load is on the advertising and the communication agency and the marketing manager. So फिर करेगा क्या? Then put all the money, throw huge share of voice and put celebs and hope in hell that it happens.
Right.
unless they have a really strong fit, I don't see huge merit in this in the long run. Like I said, it's a short-term tactic. If it's long-term, then they would have crafted it more deeply than using it the way they are.
Awesome. So we'll take one last question. This is coming from Debo. He's tuned in from KL. You can choose whether you want to answer this or not because it's a tricky one. So thanks for doing this. Loved it thoroughly. I have a request for Prem. Can you please share a case of a marketing problem that couldn't be solved as the problem was so difficult? If something comes to your mind, Prem, you can answer.
No, there are many born to bomb projects, which we know when we get the brief only hai, kuch nahi hone wala.
Born to bomb.
Call them. There are sometimes. Okay, let me give you clear examples of these.
Yeah.
One that I alluded to a little bit, but even the tea example, when it came, I thought was very difficult. When after I met a few consumers, I thought it was really difficult to get people to shift from one to the other. Right. But I'll give you the biggest traps of these kind of marketing problems. There are briefs which have an ambition of grow 2x, increase market share from 8 to 30%, double volume by 2x,
right.
Increase awareness, font awareness from 5 to 40. Fantastic. Okay. Uske baad brief mein kuch nahi hai. There is nothing. So if you see a brief that has a pompous ambition and has neither a disruptive new product or does not have a disruptive new distribution strategy or has not slashed price or introduced a format, be very suspicious of these briefs. Please tell the client this 2x, 5x ain't going to happen. Just on the back of advertising. Worse still, to Jay's point, Jay Mawani, when he put up on the restrictions, the worst briefs are, I want 3x growth. I have not changed product. I have not changed pricing. I have not changed distribution. Please stay true to everything that I've stood for so far as a brand and create something superbly viral by which my sales will go up 2x. How? You have not changed proposition. You have not changed product, pricing, distribution. And believe me, you get a lot of briefs today like that. Which have pompous ambitions with zero humility in them and nothing in the other parts of the mix that reflect any signs of bravery or ambition. Then if you get a brief like that and you truly believe communication can impact it, I'm sure it will be like a gallbladder smacking idea, right? It will be like, saying Cadbury Dairy Milk is bitter from tomorrow or some such thing. Imagine, or some such. It has to be as bizarre as that for it to disrupt something. So, Devo, to your question, if you are issuing that brief, please do the smell check on this.
Awesome. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's session. And everyone who's still here, you have to follow my YouTube channel if you haven't already done that. I'll do a shameless plug again. And this is really, really a special session because there are so many ex-colleagues, and now I see, Disha also dropping some comments. So thanks a lot to everyone. I'm not sure, we spoke about Nirav and his amazing work on Tata Sky, but I'm not sure if he's watching. So thanks everyone who's watching. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Thanks for so many comments and questions. And most importantly, thank you, Prem. You've been absolutely spectacular as was expected. So thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing those examples, for being absolutely simple, being jargon free, and living up to this whole thing that I'm trying to create, wherein you can learn from professionals and learn in a very simple, easy to understand and applicable kind of a manner. So thank you so much, Prem.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.